Hi guys, my name is Karthik and I'm from executeautomation.com and welcome to part 14 of our C# for automation testing video series. And in this video, we'll be talking about working with generic collections in C#. And before watching this part, I would request you to watch part 13 since this part is going to be a complete continuation of that part. Alright, so let's get started. So first of all, what is this generics? Generics were added to version 2.0 of C# language and the Common Language Runtime. Generics introduced to the .NET framework the concept of type parameters, which makes it possible to design classes and methods that differs the specification of one or more type until the class or method is declared and instantiated by client code. For example, by using a generic type parameter t, you can write a single class that other client codes can use without incurring the cost or risk of runtime cast or boxing operations. Remember, in our previous videos of this course, we're talking something about boxing and unboxing, typecasting. So we were also talking about like how that if we don't know some of the types and we just do a explicit conversion, there will be some kind of data loss. And then we also did some kind of implicit conversions and we came out of those problems. And also we saw some of the risk of the type safeties using the boxing and unboxing operation. But using generics, the problem of type safety is completely gone, and the reason is because it will be a generic type and you can pass the type itself as a parameter, and that type will never ever incur the cost or risk of runtime cast or boxing operation since you are passing the type as a parameter to that particular method or class that you're going to create. So if it really doesn't make any sense, don't worry about it since we will be talking about generics a lot in upcoming videos of this particular course. But just keep in mind that generics is something which was added in 2.0 of C# and we will be using generics a lot in this particular course. But for the collection, since I have the responsibility of telling you the generic collections, which is going to be very, very cool compared to the non-generic collections, it is very super important at this time that I should tell at least a heads up of what generics is all about. And then we'll work together with the collections. And once we get to the topic of generics, I'll tell you about generics a lot and much detailed. Alright, let's not waste our time on generics so much right now. And let's flip to our collections. Generic collections is available in what is called a system.collections.generic namespace, and you can see that there is a generics on the suffix of the collection, and because it is a generic collection, that's why. And if your collection contains an element of only one data type, you can use one of the class in system.collection.generic namespace to perform the operation. A generic collection enforces type safety so that no other data type can be added to it. When you retrieve an element from a generic collections, you do not have to determine its data type or convert it, right? That's the definition of generics itself. You don't really have to do a explicit cast, and that's exactly what is going to be happening with the generic collections as well. So there are different types of generic collections available in C#. And the collection that we're going to discuss about is going to be this: list, dictionary, stack, etc. So in this particular video, we'll be talking about dictionaries or list, and you will understand how great it is to work with a dictionary of generic type since it is much sophisticated and you can perform a lot of operation on it. So let's not waste our time and flip to Visual Studio to work with generic collections then. So this is the same project that we were working on our previous video while working with the non-generic collections. So this time we're going to work with a generic collections. So what I'm going to do, as usual, I'm going to write a method here and I'm going to call this as a generic collections. So generic collections, and this time we're going to work with what is called as a dictionary. But before working with the dictionary, let's first see the scenario. This, you can see that last time we worked with what is called as a login page where you have the controls and you had a value, something like this, right? And here the control was key and the values was going to be a values right here, right? But this time, as you can see, we have so many datas. You cannot just hold one key and one value here. Here we have many values, and this is going to be the key. So this time this ID is going to act something like a key, and these things are going to act as a value. So let's say this is going to be the key, and this whole stuff is going to be a value, right? So let's say I'm going to call this as values. So this is going to be the key, and these are going to be the values for that. So for this particular key 1, you should get all these values. Remember in our previous video we were talking something about what is called as an array. We can make use of array this time, and maybe in the next video we'll talk something different to perform a different operation. But let's take string this time. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to flip back to my Visual Studio, and here I'm going to create a string array, and let's call this as users. User1 is equal to new string of what is called as name as going to be Karthik, and it's going to have an age of 30, and then I'm just going to add the email, and I'm just going to add some dummy phone numbers there, right? Similarly, I'm going to add the other two users information as well for Sam and Jacob. So now we have all the values in here, and the next quest is to add these value to a dictionary for one single key, right? So for creating a dictionary, you have something called as dictionary, but this particular dictionary will not be available in the system.collection namespace. Remember, we have something called as system.collection.generic namespace. We are going to use that, right? So now if I come back here, and you can see there is something called dictionary, and there is a less than greater than symbol, which means it's a generic type. So I'm just going to open a less than or greater than symbol, and you can see that it's asking for a t key and t value. But in hash table there was something called as an object. You remember that? You can see that it's object key and object value, but here it's not object, but it is a generic type t, so it can be anything. So the t is going to be, let's say, integer, because as you can see here the ID is going to be an integer. So I'm just going to take int, and the values are going to be a string array. So you can see that I'm going to pass a type here as string array. Cool, right? So dict is equal to new of, see, IntelliSense is automatically telling that the new of dictionary int of string array. So I can just do that as well. Great. So now we can see that I'm explicitly passing this type here, and that's the reason you don't incur the cost of boxing and unboxing. So I'm just going to hold that, and within this dictionary I'm going to add the values using the usual add method. So here you can see that if I just do add, it's automatically telling that int is the key and string array is the value. So one of the string array is going to be user1. Similarly, dict.add of 2 is going to be user2, and dict.add 3 is going to be user3, right? Great. So now we have the values added in our dictionary, but how to retrieve this value? Once again, for each loop. Very, very simple. Just call this for each loop, just put this in the collection dict, and here within this dictionary we will have all our values in here. So let's call this as values, or maybe value, right? And this value is going to be actually holding a string, and you can see that right here, value dot, you can see that it has a key and value pair. So the string array is actually sitting in what is called as a value. Remember this one, this whole string is actually, string arrays is actually sitting in what is called as value, and this is going to be your key, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to use this information here, and I'm going to say string of, let's call this as user info, something like this, users info, because this is a collection. And then here again, to retrieve a value out from a string, remember in our arrays discussion how we did, again we did a for each loop like this, right? So I'm just going to use the same concept and logic here once again. For each of user info, and this is going to be the user, because it's going to hold one information. Let's write a console.writeLine, and let's call this user. I'm not going to do a decoration here. Maybe you can just add some of the logics to decorate the values to look more nicer. So I'm just going to call the generic collections, and I'm going to paste it right here. There we go. So that's it, and you can see that I can run this particular code. So I'm storing all the values in a string array, and then I'm going to store the user information in a dictionary, and dictionary value is being saved. And you can see that I'm retrieving using a for each loop, and since the string is going to be an array for this particular dictionary, again I have to do a iteration to get the value out from it, right? I'm going to save it, and now let's try to execute this code and see how it works. You can see that it is bringing me Karthik 30 kk at kk.com and this value. Similarly for Sam, for Jacob, right? So this is how you can work with a generic collections in C# to work with at least some of the complex data here. In our next video, we'll talk about working with a same kind of collections of data, but creating your own custom type to retrieve the data even more intelligently than the operation that you are performing using this string arrays, right? So that's it, guys. Once again, thank you very much for watching this video, and have a great day.